Hi, this is John Lee, also known as Jarth Furby on the Lost Marble Anime Studio forums, and today I'm here to talk about contrast in animation. Contrast is one of the most important things you need to have in order to give your animation that extra punch. And this is not a subject that I see talked about a lot. In fact, I don't see it really talked about much anywhere. But I see people using it all the time, and I am going to talk about it today so that you can give your animation that extra bit of life that might be missing. And it's also a way for you to analyze your own work, which is what I do. I always use contrast. That's probably one of the first things I focus on when I animate. But before we get into that, I want to talk about the anatomy of a stick figure. Like I said in the last screencast, a stick figure is really great for animating, and once you animate the stick figure, you can draw your finished artwork on top of it. The nice thing about stick figures is you can also experiment a lot. And the other thing is, if a pose doesn't look good in stick figure format, it's probably not going to look good when you add all the bells and whistles and the finished artwork in the end. So try to get the stick figures looking right. Working with stick figures are pretty easy to draw, so you can experiment with a lot of different poses. So, okay, let's just get with the anatomy of stick figure. The first, whoa, I guess my computer's lagging a little bit. All right. First thing is a head. A round head, then the spine. It's a little crooked. Let me do that again. There, it's more straight there. And then the shoulders, then the hips, the thigh, the calf, and the foot. So upper leg, lower leg, foot. Upper arm, lower arm, hand, thumb. Upper arm, lower arm, hand, thumb. Pretty easy. Everyone should be able to draw this. And one thing you want to keep in mind when you're animating with a stick figure are the joints. Sometimes, at least in the beginning, what I used to do is I used to put little dots in where the bodies, where the joints met, so that I could keep track of my arcs. You know, you want all your body parts following a nice smooth arc when you're animating them. Otherwise they look really choppy, and that's not good. So that's the basic anatomy of a stick figure. Now let's talk about how we can apply contrast in our animation, or what that exactly means. I mean, contrast takes many forms. Black and white, I guess, would be the most obvious, but up, down, left, right, fast to slow, slow to fast, which is what I talked about in the last lesson, squash and stretch, expand, contract, curved versus straight. So those are all the elements that you want to have working from pose to pose. So in one pose, you know, the character might be squashed, like so. Try to draw that. Put the head. Let's have him sort of sitting down. That's the waist. There's his upper leg, his lower leg, and his foot. Upper leg, lower leg, foot. And then there's the shoulders, and I'll have the arms crossed. So this is what I would call a squashed pose. Just want to mention that in the beginning I used to practice drawing lots of different poses with these stick figures, and sometimes I'd find two really cool poses and I'd be like, oh, this looks great. And I try to animate between the two poses, but for some reason, even though the two poses look great, it wasn't animating very well. And that's how I discovered the importance of contrast in my animation. So you should have two cool poses that contrast each other really well in order for it to animate, in order to have that special punch in your animation. So if this pose is a squashed pose, the next key pose should be a expanded pose. So squash, expand, or stretch, but I'm going to go with expand. So an expanded pose would be something like this. There's the head, there's the spine, there's our hips. Now notice his legs are bent and close together. I'm going to have them wide apart and stretched. So here's the upper leg, the lower leg, and the foot. So notice his legs are scrunched up, now they're spread out. The same with the arms, they're crossed in the squashed pose. So in the expanded pose, I'm going to have, in the next pose, I'm going to have it stretched out like this. There's a thumb, there's the hand, there's the thumb. Ooh, that arm came out horrible. Let's do it again. Yeah. See, the nice thing about stick figures is you can erase pretty quickly. I've just drawn a whole arm and a hand. If I had drawn the finished artwork first and had to erase that whole arm, it would have taken a lot longer. So just work out your issues with the stick figures a lot faster, and it really does help. But when you animate from the squashed position to an expanded position, the viewer is going to see a big change between these two poses, and it's going to really catch them by surprise. And that's one element that will help you breathe some life into your animation. So this was a squashed expand example. Let's see what other examples I can think of. Alright, I'll do left to right. So here, I'll draw a pose. Here's the spine. I'm going to have the character sort of facing screen left. And then the shoulder. One thing I like to do one reason why I like making the stick figures with the shoulders and the hips is because I like to angle the hips. So if the hip is this way, this is pretty flat. The shoulders, I'm going to angle it. And if the shoulders were flat, I would have angled the hips. I like to have them kind of at different angles. That's how you create a little more interest in your poses. Especially with female characters. You want those hips bending at an angle, at all kinds of angles, opposite to the shoulders. Alright, so I'll have his arms spread out like this. And so I guess the opposite of this pose would be him facing, this character facing to the right of the screen. No, what am I doing? So I'm just doing the shortcut there, flipping them horizontally. So this is left,